funds that are made through the community forest come back to the community. We wanted to make sure we had control over who was working in our watershed. That was very important. Our water is all surface water, gravity-fed water system, and it's completely surrounded by forest. We wanted to know who was working in there and have control over that. We also wanted to have control over what our view is around the village of Clinton. We didn't want to see clear cuts. Of course, fires happen, and unfortunately, sometimes clear cutting is the only way to remove all the dead. I think it would have made a big difference if we'd been able to do the management first and build fire breaks so the fire didn't get close to town. It would have certainly relieved a lot of minds. People were very concerned that they could lose their homes because we do live in an area surrounded completely by forests. 2017 was a very scary time. The Elephant Hill wildfire attempted to come over Hart Ridge into Clinton. Thankfully, we had a lot of different fire departments here coming to our aid. No structures in the town were lost, but a lot of the community forest was burned. And that meant there would be a lot of salvage from that after the fact. People were concerned they were going to lose their homes, and I think having the fire protection in place beforehand would have made a big difference. That's why we're looking at doing it on the west side of town, because that's where our prevailing winds come from, and there's a lot of thick forest out there that we need to manage prior to a big fire. The Elephant Hill fire came from south of Ashcroft and kept moving north. It didn't want to stop. It got all the way up to Sheridan Lake. We were inundated with smoke for weeks. Our highways were closed. We were isolated prior to being evacuated. When you live in a community completely surrounded by forest, you're always at risk. The community forest is operating in that area where we need the fire break, and they're the ones that have the expertise to go in and work with the Ministry of Forests and do the fire mitigation prior to an event, and that's what we need. The community forest has been really good about educating people on why there's a need to remove some trees so the rest can have room to grow and reduce fire risk. That's the important part, so people can understand why there's cutting, why there's fuel management. It's a foreign language to some people, myself included. I didn't know anything about forest management prior to us acquiring a community forest. I've learned a lot. One of the reasons for the community forest was to raise funds outside of taxation, because we have an aging population, we have a limited number of residents. We lost our mill, so we don't have the industrial tax base anymore. So if we can raise money for things in the community without raising taxes, that's huge. And the community forest helps offset the cost of some things that we may not otherwise be able to get. We have that money in reserves, so if something comes up that we need or want, it's there. A few years from now, we're going to need to replace a fire truck. We can use some of the money for that, which just makes sense that you're using money from the forest to buy a fire truck to help protect your community from forest fires. The community forest went in and had all the dead, damaged trees removed. Of course, some of it couldn't be sold for lumber because of the burn on it, so they had to find other uses for it. They were able to grind or chip a lot of it for biofuel or hog fuel or whatever to get it off the forest floor, so it's no longer there as fuel for any future fires that may come through. Looking at that ridge now, it's hard to remember what it looked like before the fires. It's thinned out, it's in some areas almost park-like, and it looks so much better having been cleaned up after the fires. For one thing, piling and burning it puts more smoke in the air, more particulates in the air. We had enough of that in 2017. and of course in 2021. For years I had been pushing the community forest to find some use for that residue, because it just bothered me that all this stuff was left sitting out in the bush, and at some point it was going to be burned. I kept saying there must be a use for this, and yeah, there was. They hauled the majority of it out and ground it. We can do our bit to help mitigate climate change, and if we continue doing that instead of burning, taking it off the land and finding a use for it, then that's our part. That's something we can control.
So my name is Steve Law. I'm a RPF, and I'm the manager of the Clinton Community Forest. So I manage all the logging, harvesting, silviculture operations associated with this license. We're in the Elephant Hill Wildfire. Right now we're in the community forest area. We've burned a couple of woodlots up here, the village's woodlot and a private woodlot. And what we're doing here is we're salvaging the burnt timber. It burns in varying degrees of intensity. In some areas it burns very severely. And yes, this is a pretty popular area for recreation and hunting, and there's lots of mule deer in the vicinity. So we have to keep all that in mind, and we designed the harvesting to maintain natural drainage patterns and to mitigate any potential impacts like that. Across the highway on the other side of Clinton, it's still exactly the same forest type, and we're going to have fires occur here naturally on a regular basis. So we're still threatened by fire, and we're still doing fire mitigation activities to try to reduce the hazard to Clinton. We started doing fuel mitigation work as far back as 2007. The community felt that fire was a risk, obviously, and they developed a community wildfire protection plan. Way back then it was recognized by the community that fire is a constant threat and they wanted to do something about it. So that's what started this Forest Enhancement Society fuel break, 100-meter wide fuel break that we're here today to look at. And it's still a thought in the community. I mean, we are currently doing another one on the far side of town. One of our goals and one of the directions from the board is to always utilize as much of the fiber as we possibly can. We shipped a biomass log to be ground to hog fuel for power, electric power. So this is a 100-meter wide strategic fuel break just above the village of Clinton, and the intent is to reduce the fuel, the understory fuel and ladder fuels that would allow a fire to get into the crown, and leave approximately 200 stems per hectare of the larger trees with a crown spacing to prevent the fire from carrying through the crown.